At the moment, there's no connection between regulatory capital in Mexico and the real risk the trading desk is taking.
Okay, well, that's actually an awesome topic to discuss, because if you think about what you said earlier, where banking book systems are different than trading book systems, John did a presentation yesterday where he was talking about CVA, DVA, FVA, MVA, all of the different stuff you have to do in the trading book side of things. You also have counterparty exposure risk that you have to calculate. Now, what you're saying is that you're having to do all of that now in the banking book as well as the trading book for systems. I mean, is this something that banks can handle, John? Can this all be calculated?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to pick up on one or two points. I mean, I think there is, as you say, a bit of a disconnect sometimes. You're doing something to keep the regulators happy, but if you just left to yourself to do risk management, this is not what you would do. You would, say, manage market risk in a quite different way from FRTB. And so, you do FRTB because the regulators are telling you to do it, but the way you really want to do market risk is something quite different. And I think we're seeing more of that disconnect these days. And I'd also like to pick up on cybersecurity, because my interactions with CROs indicates that if there's one big risk that keeps them awake at night, it's cybersecurity. I think what you have to do is to accept the fact that you are going to be attacked. There is going to be a serious attack. It's going to get through your defenses sooner or later, and you've got to plan for it. So you've got to decide, maybe you've got to close down the bank for 2 days. You can categorize the different sorts of attacks that might happen, how you're going to respond to them, what you're going to tell the stakeholders about it, and that sort of thing. Okay, you mentioned like XVAs. Yeah, I think that's a big thing. That what I mentioned in my breakfast presentation yesterday was the computational burden that's created by all these various XVAs. I think this is one of the interesting things about machine learning. The machine learning can actually ease the computational burden. I mean, sometimes it can give you an accurate answer, or if you do enough work in advance, it can give you an accurate answer more quickly, or sometimes it can just give you an approximate answer that's good enough. If the trader's sitting at the desk and wants to know what's the incremental effect of a new trade on one of the BAs, maybe machine learning can give an approximate answer.
John, I would be interested in your opinion. How these SBA, FBA, and MBAs lead together with this new initiative from the ISDA to margin everything. Is it still necessary to have these FBA, SBAs, and all that stuff, and on the other side having this initiative from the ISDA that requires that everything should be margin?
So, this same emission margin is an area where the same sensitivities as used for the standard approach can be used, into the SIM calculation. But what we see is it's really the corporate clients that have, no collateral or large CDA exposures, and also they're the most difficult ones to model because you don't exactly have big CDS exposures, to estimate the CDA in these clients. And I think, John's really touched on a lot of topics here because especially when we move from CDA, FVA, to like MBA, KVA, it's another order of magnitude bigger challenge because, we already have like whatever 2 million scenarios for CDA with your different, Monte Carlo scenarios for different horizons, and now we need to compute sensitivities at each of those points to compute this.
And the challenge there is that there's kind of a standard, straightforward to calculate CDA, or probably the second order FBA, but then NBA and KVA are kind of complex.
NBA is quite standard because you can compute SIM. So SIM is a defined methodology. Now KVA is challenging because different banks might want to model their capital within the KVA calculation different ways. So what Murex approach we've taken is to try and put in standard methods like SACCO, for example, for each of the scenarios, and base the KVA on. But we don't believe, at least the choice we've made, and I'm actually interested to come back to the machine learning topic, but with traditional calculations, we don't see how it's possible to do MVA, KVA calculations on a normal infrastructure. which is why we're really building out a cloud solution for this. Because on the cloud we have the full elasticity to have a massive computational grid to do these calculations.
And if I understand the point that Abraham is making, I mean, I think you were sort of talking about how regulators are going to get interested in VAs. Maybe Basel V will be when you come to capital, you know how your VAs may change. I mean, my understanding anyway is that the regulators aren't getting too much into the VAs right now.
The CBA was chair.
CBA and DBA have been around for a long time, yeah. But as far as the other, MBA, KBAs, and so on,
Well, the
FBA.
KBA will become more relevant as the cost of capital and optimizing, pricing in the cost of capital into the trade.
Yeah, with
becomes more
everything
important.
margin,
Yeah.
this is going to be the FBA, right?
It's Basel V. Basel V we can.
I'm glad that we have worked for many years.
So before we get to Basel V, let's just talk about the amount of data that we're providing to regulators, and are we doing a lot of work that's worthwhile? So you must send a ton of information to the regulators. Do they look at it?
Yeah, the way I see the regulatory framework evolving is at some point we will find some balance. After the credit crisis, we moved from a totally unregulated environment to ultra-regulated environment, which has created a lot of unexpected consequences, I would say. The cost of doing business is becoming too expensive right now for the banking industry. And in my view, what's going on here is, because of lack of regulation, we created the banks that we call too big to fail. But now, because of the excess of regulations, we're creating them too small to compete. And that's going to be a problem sooner or later. So in my interaction with different regulators across Latin America and Canada as well, what I can see is more willingness to reconsider the unexpected consequences of introducing more and more complex regulations. The value added in many cases is not consistent with the ultimate purpose of those regulations. So there's a lot going on, and I expect all of these discussions to continue going on for some time. But I feel that we are getting to rebalance this pendulum. It went from non-regulations to too much regulations, and I feel at some point we will get back to balance.
Yeah, I can see that. I think the pendulum swings backwards and forwards. It's gone too far in the ultra-regulation direction, yeah.
So Gustavo, when you're talking to your students about your job, do you tell them how your relationship with the regulators are and how you try to negotiate with the regulators to reduce your burden?
Yeah, happily now in my current role, I don't have to deal with regulators, but in my prior role, for sure. And I agree with both of the points of view. And I could add something else. There's a discussion amongst the industry of how these authorities are using all the data that we're submitting. Because there's the perception that most of the data, lots of tons of reports that we're sending to them are not quite, they're not being processed from their point of view. Perhaps there's a perception that there's a misuse of that information. So we're trying to understand why they're asking us as banks and insurance companies, etc., just this amount of information and what for. In the end, are they really using it? And then that gives us another topic of discussion, because in order to comply with that regulation, perhaps we're going to make a lot of investments in terms of human resources, systems, databases, etc., etc. And I know that regulation comes with costs, no? And it's a lot of burden, and it's a lot of investment in time as well. No? So I think that's a discussion that we also have to make with the authorities, because in the sense, if that pendulum is going too far away, really, is it going to be useful to avoid a future crisis? And that's an important question that we have to ask.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great question, and I think that also opens us up to a conversation around current systems, future systems, and future technology. So, you brought up a great point about banking book, trading book. Traditionally, two totally different systems, different data going into those systems, different data stored for those systems, and now you're being asked to bring that together into one place. And yeah, maybe you can do it on a standard model, but if you use an advanced approach, you're going to have to really revamp. That's going to be a costly adventure.
And it's a challenge to try to be state of the art at all the times. So you think of how are you going to be in the next 3 years, and then in the next 3 years, and then in the next 3 years in grounds of technology. But also, you never end.
Also, like as a vendor, this is going to be a challenge for us because
And it's
as
all
requirements come in, we're putting them in the newer versions of say our software. But you know, some platforms and years can be a big beast and take a few months to upgrade. So we're trying to work on ways of improving, upgrade as a service business. But this is also where the cloud, I think, brings a lot of potential. So once you have like services available on multi-tenant SaaS on the cloud, at least it allows vendors to patch those. So the release of Murex next year is called MX Pass, Murex Product as a Service. The plan is to put updates every 2 weeks. So as these regulations are improving, at least it will allow the client base, once they get onto it, to benefit from those features. Because one challenge we've had, and able to talk to that is, you still have software that's 3 years old, 4 years old, and it can be challenging to meet these evolving requirements with this framework.
And many vendors are just out of place because they do not update their frameworks to new trends and all that stuff. And the market is becoming small for vendors as well.
So there's an interesting challenge for the CROs. You've got traditional vendors who are now porting all of their stuff on the cloud, thus taking the burden off of the client for managing it. But then you have all these newer technologies in the microservices space that are coming out of nowhere, and some of the big banks are adopting, these platforms. So OpenFin comes to mind, a bunch of these players who are, emerging technologies that are all built on very easy to integrate technologies, but are they going to be around? Right? They may have some great software for you, but can they solve your problem? And the AI companies are, everybody's an AI company now, and you have to have it. Even yours is an AI company now. But it is an interesting dilemma. So I don't know, how do you guys look at that? John, maybe you could chime in on your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, about 18 months ago, I started to get interested in machine learning. I guess, there are a couple of reasons. One is that I think it's going to be really important to our students who major in finance. I think in order to survive in a job in finance over the next, shall we say, 30 or 40 years, you're going to have to be able to talk to data scientists. You're going to have to, you don't actually have to be a data scientist, but you have to be able to, understand what data scientists are doing, manage big data sets, and do a different type of job to the sort of job that you maybe would have done a few years ago. Yeah, I think AI, machine learning is going to be incredibly important in the years ahead. The other reason why I got into it is because I find the mindset that you need for machine learning is much the same as the mindset you need for derivatives, so it's a natural for me to sort of move into that area. Actually, if any of you guys out there are thinking, what career should I go into? I think one of the most rewarding careers in the 21st century is going to be machine learning, or we can say data science. I think that's going to be one of the most exciting areas to work with.
So Marcelo, I'm pretty sure John just called them dinosaurs. But are you dinosaurs? Are we all done here? We're not data scientists and AI people?
You guys don't understand data science. But I mean, the jobs, just the digitization changed everybody's job. We've all got computers on our desk now. But we're not all computer programmers.
Right.
But we've all learned how to use computer programs that have been written by other people. Right? We all know how to use Word and Excel and so on and so on. Same should be true with data science. We're not all going to be managing these algorithms and so on, but we're all going to have to understand how to use the outputs, how to manage big data sets,
It's not straightforward because it's hard to know when it's wrong, it's hard to know why it's wrong. And
That's going to be the skill.
yeah, and I was just wondering, John, if you have any thoughts on, model approval or regulatory approval of machine learning models. I know what Murex, one of the things we were looking at was we can see that we can speed up, say, 1,000 times the risk calculation using machine learning like regressions for, instead of calling like complex driven pricing models, we get very good results. But what we're trying to use it for is to see, for example, if you do a Taylor bar, it can be good in many cases. If you do a Fourier bar, it's much more accurate but much more expensive. So what we decided to do is run a machine learning algorithm to produce a set of vectors, compare it to the Taylor bar, and if they're close, to use the Taylor bar vector. If they're not, to call the full pricing model. So at least all the numbers that you're submitting, you can explain. It's either Taylor or Fourier, and you're just using the machine learning algorithm to do the rest. But we don't know yet if we're at the point where we could submit the machine learning PL vectors, for our calculation. I don't know if you thoughts on that.
Yeah, I didn't catch everything you said there, but yeah, I mean the regulatory approval for machine learning algorithms is an interesting one. The other is the interpretability of the outputs, which is a big thing in machine learning these days. You've not only got to have a black box, which makes fantastic decisions, you've got to explain how the decisions are made. And I think regulators are getting there. I mean, I talked to a number of regulators about machine learning. If you're a regulator and you want to look and see if a particular machine learning algorithm has been implemented properly and that sort of thing, you say, well, did they do the right things? Did they have a training set, a validation set, a test set? Can I see the results from those three things? Have you got the interpretability of the output? They know how to ask the right questions in my experience. So they're getting there.
Also a collateral picture because potentially it will give us a higher exposure to other risk as well. So we agree with this conception because a higher dependency on calculations.
Yeah, no. As I said in my one-day workshop yesterday, you might think, human beings have got all sorts of biases and so on. Machines take logical decisions, but that's not true, of course. Machines have just as many biases as human beings do. And, that's one thing we've got to be concerned about.
So this was a big problem in the States for credit scoring, whereas it's using people's, because you don't know all the attributes that the model uses. It could be households and other demographic data that was really student loan approvals and putting banks at risk of migration.
So I think that brings up a pretty interesting point, which is the effect on the consumer. Right? So ultimately, you guys are serving customers, and those customers are going to bear the burden of these costs. Because you're not going to go out of business because of costs. You're going to do everything you can to reduce those costs because you want to keep your clients. But how does this impact the customers? And the culture internally is something that I think is interesting too.
Well, yeah, that's extremely fascinating because technology is making customers to have higher expectations from banks. They want quick responses. They want quick answers. They don't want to interact with humans ideally. So, imagine how will the risk manager of 2050, just to mention one time frame, it's pretty difficult. I mean, what I can imagine is that, whoever is going to be the chief risk officer in a financial institution in 2050 is going to have a totally different skill set to the chief risk officer right now. All of these new technologies are creating in a number of dimensions different situations that we don't know how to deal with as it. Just to mention some, for instance, one existing discussion in Canada is about the runoff rate for retail policies. Because of the availability of technologies to move from one bank to the other, now retail deposits are not stable. I mean, savings accounts, you have seen that probably, we We see on TV new rates for savings accounts every week, and you can take your money from bank A to bank B like this in 1 millisecond. So why would you consider those deposits stable, for instance? Just to mention one aspect of technology, not even to talk about machine learning and competing with other non-financial institutions. One of the most fascinating topics to me has to do with the fintechs, and particularly with the payment space, because those are not deposit-taking institutions. However, they are handling a ton of money. I mean, the last time I saw the financial statements of PayPal, just to mention one, the flow of funds that they were managing at the end of the quarter was $18 billion. So they have $18 billion. That money is being invested in 10-year treasuries, probably. And you know, it is a non-regulated company. It is not a deposit-taking institution. And we banks need to compete with it.
Now we have Apple.
Apple Pay, Amazon is starting the same situation. So there's a number of
Shell, Venmo.
Just to
Venmo's a
mention-
social media company, right? They're not a bank company, but everybody trades money over it, right? Very interesting.
Exactly. So it's very interesting to to start thinking, how are we gonna continue competing in this changing environment with new technologies?
Much better to be a shadow bank than a real bank.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because of regulations, as we said before, is going to happen.
We've really seen it on the asset management side, you know, with the governments and global advisors really allowing the treatment of asset management.
It's interesting. So I'm with Axioma. We mostly have asset managers, asset owners, hedge funds, and clients. We do our portfolio construction and the like. One of the things they're pushing us heavily to do now is we're using, AI, neural network type stuff to do what we're calling smart analytics. What smart analytics is taking the reports that come out at night and automatically deciding, not having the CRO or having the PM decide, but automatically deciding what are the next things that you want to look at, run all of those statistics and analytics, and then, if need be, what hedges should be suggested for the risk that you're taking. All that happening in the background before anybody's ever looked at the reports, so when they come in the next morning, they can say, oh, I have this risk. Ooh, that's how I can hedge this risk, because that's something I want to put on. And this is the sophistication of the asset management. And so, I'm sure you're seeing this, that, your clients are feeling squeezed and probably don't want to have any more charges from you, and they're getting pretty sophisticated.
That is correct. The role of the chief risk officer is becoming sophisticated as well. We have evolved from guys that were only aware of risk, and now what I say is that we are guys that we are aware and that we want to optimize the risk and return relationship. So different from the older risk management. So we have a challenge as well to be along with these new technologies and new trends, but also with this new way of being an asset for our companies.
So 20 years ago,
Like, limit management, watchdog style role to more next year pricing, also take the risk, but make sure you price it properly.
yeah, exactly. I was going there. 20 years ago, we were trying to get senior managers to understand what risk is and what it means. And, the crisis kind of helped with that a bit. And now they all understand what risk calculations are and what regulatory calculations are. But is the risk culture something that's realistic in today's world, in the technology world? I mean, maybe stuff.
I think we have to
Maybe
make a deep dive. Can you hear me? I think we have to make a deep dive on that because enhancing the risk culture within the organizations is something that is really important. Because what we expect out of our colleagues is not only to comply with the rules of the game, but also to have the right incentives to do the right thing, just because this is the ethical way to do it. So I think a lot of the conversations have been turned into that because that's a way to avoid future crises, in order to prevent and be preventive. That will be the aim, also.
So, just following up on that, how do you, I don't know if you force it, how do you create a culture in an organization like yours? I
and it comes somewhat from the top down, but you have to be hiring the right people. I mean, there's all sorts of challenges here.
It is a combination of factors. For sure, there's a component of the human resources side, but also is and Ram was mentioning is aligning the right incentives to people. For example, in Mexico, we need to comply. We need to align the compensation schemes in order to avoid conflict of interest. So that would be something that has to be taken into account in order to avoid potential mistakes in terms of the decision-making process. That would be an example. Another way to enhance the culture within the organizations, for example, is to implementing the freelance or defense model that is somehow become a benchmark within organizations, not only in the financial system, but also in other industries. So this is pretty much the conversation that we have been having amongst the participants of the market, and I think it's paying off. At least that's my perception. We have been enhancing our capabilities not only in managing risks, the financial risks, but also the non-financial risks, as Marcelo was mentioning before. So I think we're in a good path.
So,
If I just add to that, actually, interesting idea. A friend of mine in Toronto has got a startup which is designed to measure risk culture. And how do they do that? Well, you look at all the emails and look for particular words in the emails and so on, and you say, well, you know, this bank is got a lot better culture than this bank. You just compare the sort of words that people use when they're talking to each other and so on. I don't know whether it's going to work, but he's trying to do
so
it.
instead of using the signals for trading, you're using the signals to know whether there's a risk culture inside.
Or you could sort of listen to the trading. That's another way of it.
So Marcelo, when you hire 20 of his people coming out of college, they're brilliant, they're data scientists, they're coders, they know everything about how to model a derivative. Can they manage risk?
Well, that's an interesting question because risk management has two components. One is a technical component, and all of the skills you mentioned are on that side. The technical knowledge and expertise to deal with models, pricing, knowing capital markets, understanding the technical variables. But I believe that, at least to me, what resonates the most as a real culture of risk management is understanding that the banking system plays a very important and crucial social role. So it's our social responsibility to be risk managers. Just to mention some examples, when you talk about cyber security, it's not about talking about algorithms or whatever the code is to detect what kind of attacks you may be suffering. It's understanding that we're preserving your money, your retirement, your parents' retirement. It's a social goal. You know what I mean? Important. And the technical components of my view is understanding the social responsibility attached to it. Money laundering is another wonderful example. It is not just that we do money laundering because criminals are bad. It is about human suffering. Money laundering is about arms and weapons traffic. It's about drugs. It's about people suffering. It's about it's human. It's really a social component to it. So what I expect from my people, including those graduated in the University of Toronto, is to understand that the playground we're in is a social responsibility. And in order to fully accomplish that role, we need to have certain technical skills. That's a very ambition.
So is the regulator managing the difference between greed and social responsibility? Is that what's happening here?
No, regulators are getting there too. I mean, regulators are actually enforcing aspects of social responsibility as well. For instance, different capital charges for companies not certified on the mining industry. That's common. I mean, if they are not certified, not having child labor, for instance, or environmental certifications, capital charges are different. So regulators are getting there too, trying to enforce that banks are acting social responsibility as well. Now, the role of regulators is to make sure there is a level playing field for all of the banks, but the actual risk manager is really responsible for managing the actual risk of an organization.
You know, over that. Explain those emails that.
Yeah, well, I think that it's crucial for a risk culture to everybody who speaks the same language. Because as I said many years ago, the risk manager spoke one language, and the people from treasury another language, and the people from the trading desk another language. The regulation, of course, sets a common ground, but also there should be a common language in the organization in order for the risk culture to be effective. So I think that with the evolution of the risk manager itself, this common language is better suited.
Does the common language have to be between banks, or can it just be within your bank?
I think between banks, but inside the bank as well, between teams with people. As you were saying, if you are hiring a quant from the top management school or from the Quran, if you hire this kind of people, you have to first try to teach them how to speak the human language, even if they are so good in technical matters.
Okay, so let's shift for some. Let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity, because I think it's something we ought to spend a little more time on. I had an interesting conversation with the Chief Security Officer of Microsoft. So he's got a lot of people he works with, and we were chatting, and he was saying that they have 5,000 people in Seattle who all had a password that was based on the same thing. Right? So when they did their search, they found that 5,000 people were basing their password on a local football team. Right? That's a pretty easy target. And instead of getting everyone to change their passwords over and over again, they changed the passwords electronically behind the password on the machine. So he eliminated the entire problem by putting in a piece of technology, happened to be a bit of AI technology, that would automate the change in the password. Now, if somebody was on that machine, sure, they could probably figure out the password, but they couldn't hack in and figure it out because it's changing all the time, and the user didn't know. So a better user experience by far, less costly because they don't have to fix everybody's passwords all the time, and a hell of a lot safer, right? Very interesting, simple stories they told about how I changed things. So can we do that in risk management? Are there things in the security that breaches that we're worried about in risk management that, our customers' information, are there things that we can do? It's not easy to do.
It is not, and it is a new stream within the risk management area. I can say that I've seen a number of banks creating specific rules for people dealing with those situations, chief data officers, chief cybersecurity officers, and it's a totally new area of expertise. Banks are not necessarily the leading edge in that arena, and I'm not an expert on that, but what I can say is that the most difficult part for banks to deal with those new situations is to attract talent willing to work for banks, because most of the best graduated students in any reputable university in the US or anywhere else has the dream of going to Silicon Valley and working with flip-flops and t-shirts, right? They don't want to go to work for banks. So what we have done in particular is to create environments similar to those environments you will find in Google or Amazon in order to attract people. That's going to be a big challenge going forward.
That's a huge challenge. Google, Amazon, all those guys are taking the best talent out of college because it's a great environment and they want to be a part of it. It's exciting, and it's very hard to get people to come to the events. I'm sorry?
Maybe that's the one work culture. I've had some bizarre conversations too with clients where, we're trying to move them into the cloud from hosting it locally at the bank, and their IT teams and the security architects are concerned about the cloud security. Amazon is far better cloud security than what most of the banks are moving. So actually this move to the cloud is actually going to tighten up a lot.
2 years ago, major concern. I'd say now it's, 30% of people are concerned about it, the other 70 get it. But I agree, it's an interesting, it's almost an education you have to go through.
Yeah, and that's making a big change. I was telling my colleagues the other day, we have certain accommodations in Toronto called digital factories, where we're placing these young tech guys working for Tank. And I invited my son to know that accommodation, and he was like shocked. It is the sexy place to work in right now. So in my old days, when I started my career, working in the trading floor was the sexy spot, right? I mean, that was the place where all young guys wanted to be. Not anymore. Now it's what we call the digital factory, with ping pong tables instead of desks, and free lunch and free.
They are allowed to go for work in
Absolutely. It's all permission.
No ties,
Only coming.
Like last year, we worked on a project with Bank where they put people from Eurex and the client on site because we work with this. And every time you go to the restroom, you're tripping over dog leads and people with tattoos. It's a big change.
Yeah, it's a big change. And again, that will continue to be a challenge to keep talent in the banking system.
Okay, I want to cover at least one more topic because we kind of have to do it every time, and then open it up for questions. I'll call this political risk, but we'll start with why John loves Brexit so much. Can you tell us why you love Brexit so much?
Yeah, well, tough question, incorrect question. Because I am British originally, as you probably know, and Brexit is how a sovereign country is committing suicide. So I'm not a big fan of Brexit. My favorite quote actually on Brexit, which I think everybody in this room will relate to, is it was from one of the I can't remember exactly who. It was from one of the European Union negotiators, and he made this comment that we all understand English, but we don't understand England. I guess everybody in the room probably feels the same way. You guys all understand English. What England is doing is crazy.
So for risk managers, how do you guys handle things like, trade wars, Trump craziness, Brexit? I mean, how does one go about it? You can't just be stress testing because it seems to change weekly, at least with my home country, but with other countries.
In my opinion, markets used to believe a lot in Trump. So there was a lot of volatility when Trump said something crazy, a couple of months ago. But nowadays, I think that markets are less volatile when Trump speaks or makes something stupid. Even Paul Krugman wrote in the Times, 1 or 2 weeks ago, the delusion effect of Trump on markets, saying that markets, nowadays, they do not believe in Trump anymore.
Yes.
And the same, I think, is going to happen in our case, because in the first place, when our president arrived into the office, markets were so volatile. Markets, I think, nowadays, they still believe it is that they will, at some point, stop believing.
You can really see the starting battery track. There be no coast to
I guess I would put Trump as a kind of 7 deviation rule event, but besides that, Argentina, or Italy, there's plenty of things to worry about. How do you guys address that as a risk manager?
It's really tough because uncertainty is an normality, and black swans are rising more often than we want to really realize. So this right, and every week you see something when it's piling up to the uncertainty of last week. So it's getting a little bit crazy. And as Abraham was saying, not everything is discounted by the market. So it's really tough sometimes.
Marcelo?
Yeah, I see two aspects of that question. One is what's going on in the global politics, and of course the trend is some people in some countries trying to move back from globalization to localization. That's what Trump is pretty much proposing, and some other leaders in Europe as well. The risk of additional countries getting into that trend is not low, and as a banking institution, I guess we need to be careful with cross-border risk in particular, and running stress test scenarios on a regular basis. That's the only way to deal with that. There's no other way.
So John, if we have 3 or 4, 5 standard deviation rules in a year, can AI sort through the data to figure out what we were doing wrong and why?
Sure.
Of course, yes. No, but is it a data problem? We'll get it straight. Is it a data problem or is it a model problem?
Sorry, what?
Is it a data problem or a model problem? Do we not have the technology to analyze the data well enough? Or are we not?
Well, if you're a purist AI person, everything's a data problem. You just let the data tell you. You don't start with the hardware stuff.
But some of this is human as well. It's scenario analysis where people need to make judgments about key scenarios, about the impacts of scenarios. And someone said to me last week, actually, it was interesting. I hadn't considered this before. Really, through a direct line between all the quantitative easing that we've seen over the past 10 years and this rise in populism. Because what's happening is, as this money is being pumped into the economy, it's increasing inequalities because it's pushing up asset prices. And, this is the big problem in our society, is you have that 30% of society that feels left out and gets angrier and, pursues more and more illogical policies. Like Brexit, people have gone beyond trying to explain any benefits of it, and it's just this, stoic, let's get on with it and get it done.
I think the German stock exchange think it's going to be good for that. Maybe they're going to want to.
It's been good for Fentanyl O'Toole in the Irish Times. But apart from that, I've seen very few winners.
So I guess we've only got about 8 minutes left. So happy to take questions if anybody has any questions in the audience. I mean, we've got a group of panelists up here that you can challenge. You can ask any kind of interesting questions you want to ask. Any hands? If not, I'm going to continue on.
Okay, so if you were to advise young people today who are interested in finance, obviously, what part of finance would you tell people into? Treasury. And give us a little reason. Give us a little reason to.
Now, Treasury has the big picture of the balance sheet. Treasury has to fund the balance sheet. So,
With what?
so as I say, how you fund your balance sheet is the core of the bank. If you don't have a way to fund the balance sheet in the best possible way, you are not an efficient bank. So this role is crucial, and it's a role of also that requires a lot of risk management.
David, what would you tell your 12-year-old to do?
I'm kind of biased from where to be, but I really see the intersection of computing and finance. Like, if people can learn not just finance course and machine learning, but some, IT skills as well. That combination, I think, should have good career prospects.
So,
I will say that the quantitative side of the business is getting more track within the institutions, combined with some of the skills, just like good judgment. I think that would be some of the things that we will aim to have in our human resource as well, and to be a good risk manager in the end. So I think I will say that would be something that we're looking for.
Yep. John?
Well, as I said earlier, I think data science is a really interesting area to work in. I think that's the area I would choose if I was looking for a job now. But, it used to be the case that, what companies were looking for when they were recruiting our students, good communication skills plus good math skills. So math background or something like that. Now they're looking for math to computer science in terms of, you know, what
If you can't program in 3 languages, you're not going to be useful anymore, right?
But we find it easier to take people with good finance skills and teach them the IT, and take people with good IT skills and teach them the finance skills. So
which is
easier. You need to get to grips with the math and the calculus.
yeah.
Marcel?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I usually recommend young people in particular to look at sites like private equity firms. They can identify good ideas and being able to turn those ideas to cash flows. I love that aspect of the business. I've never been involved with it, but over the past few years, I've been getting more and more familiar with it, and I like it.
All right, you stole the question I was going to ask next, which was buy side or sell side. So we'll skip that because I think this is, kind of went for the buy side of the market. So I'll switch the question. ESG. The future, temporary trend, obviously regionally it's different, but is ESG something that is here to stay and we all need to really deal with the fact that people don't want to invest in whatever they claim is not their ESG?
Well, I think it's temporary, in my point of view.
Okay.
Because, as I was saying, this stuff evolves so quickly that there's always something new. So,
I think sustainability is a very important topic. We've got a new directive on it at my business. I'm not teaching it, but somebody else is teaching it next year. I think it's here to stay.
And Gustavo, as part of this culture, sustainability, governance, being good citizens. Endure. Okay? So?
I insist. Knowing that we're part of a society as a financial institution is key. So, all aspects related to sustainable development are positive in my view, and they are here to stay.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank the panel for your insights today. I thought it was a lot of fun. I don't think we got to every topic we wanted to, but I'm sure all of them would be happy to talk to folks afterwards. So thanks very much.